go into the regular show. Hey, if you got this part of the video, you've got the live unedited edition. Home Gadget Geeks, Thursday night. It's April 28th, 2022. It's 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, 9 Eastern. If you got it any other time on YouTube than that, you've got the recorded version of the live recording. And that's okay. This is the good one. This is where we have the beer pour and all the other things up front. Live folks checking in. I see a few of you out there. Check in the chat room. If you want to watch the edited version, just go to our live page. So it's theaverageguy.tv/YouTube if you want to do it. Uncle Marv's checking in. Good to see you. Ken, I saw a little bit earlier. I have my oldest son with me tonight, Phil. Phil's hanging out with us. No beer pour, but Phil contacted me this afternoon and said, "Hey, I got a new bourbon. You want to taste it?" I was like, "Yeah." So, Phil, welcome. It's good to have you first time. I can't believe I haven't had you on yet. We've been doing this 10 and a half years, and I can't believe we haven't had you on. But you're on now, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun.
What are we drinking? What did you bring over? You put in my this is probably whiskey glass.
Yeah.
What are we drinking?
So today I got to experience for the first time, heard a ton about it, and obviously I'm not super new to or super experienced in the bourbon whiskey world, but finally got turned on to the Wild Turkey rare breed. Heard a lot of good stuff about it. Finally was able to try some.
Put that back up on the screen really quick
here
so
you go.
Folks get a chance to. Okay. Wild Turkey growing up didn't have the best reputation.
Yeah, and that is in the bourbon and whiskey world. That's definitely one of the things that's talked about quite a bit. I actually have the rare breed is not the cheapest thing in the world. It's about $50 to $60 around this area for a bottle. The Wild Turkey 101 is a good staple for the cabinet. This is $25 around here, and it's just as solid as most $30 to $40 bottles. So this is kind of the one that got the reputation a while back for being one of those party whiskeys, and it's a whole different ball game these days. So it's really good stuff, really solid. Recommend trying it.
What's the proof difference?
Oh yeah, the proof difference is pretty big.
Yeah.
The Wild Turkey 101 is 101 proof, so it's still on the high side for the most part. But the rare breed is a barrel proof, and it is like 116.
Oh, okay.
So it comes out to about 58%, which I don't know. I'm not used to drinking stuff that's that high of a proof, and after 2 or 3 sips, you don't really notice it that much anymore.
I don't know. This would take a little bit. Like this is the first time I had a little sip when you were here.
Yeah,
but
I'm speaking to my own experience though.
It's like that's a little
yeah,
it's a lot.
It's definitely not an easy. It's definitely not an easy one. It's not a smooth sipper. Like if you want to like dive in for something intense, and like it's got a lot of depth and complexity, and there's a lot to explore. So you just got to buckle up a little bit.
Definitely the caramels, the corn, you can taste the corn in there for sure.
Yeah.
It's complex.
It's pretty spicy.
It's bitey. This would be good to try with a mellow cigar. Like that would be a pretty good, get a good Connecticut or something along those lines. It'd be a pretty good.
Well, then
good try anyways.
I don't know how far we're going to dive into this part of it, but you know how we've been doing the bourbon tastings.
Yeah.
We're kind of side by side comparison, sip a little bit of 4 or 5 different types. This is one that you get 3 or 4 taste or, samples in, and then this one starts to mellow out just a little bit more. And
do you think?
I think so. Yeah.
You definitely got to kind of get it. Can't let it sit too long. You kind of get it swallowed over the top so that it's not like the burn doesn't linger in there. What Phil's referring to is, I don't know, since the beginning of the year, we have been trying to purchase just as many different varieties of bourbon as we can that's available in our market. We've probably done, I don't know, a dozen.
Going for some quality though.
Yeah. Well, when we bought some lower end. I'm gonna have some bourbon burps in here. We bought some lower end Point Rider and Cooper's Chase. Not the most expensive thing in the world. And little red solo cups, the little shots, and you just fill them up to the first line, the very bottom line. And we go around 5 or 6. Jefferson's is kind of, you guys have heard me talk about that with Weaker. That's kind of our bar. That's our family favorite. So much so that John found that bottle of rum cask. I thought was out. I thought they had stopped making that. Maybe they have, but one of our local wine shops had it, and he picked it up. It was $100. So
that's honestly a lot cheaper than I thought it would be. And that's a unicorn bottle for us. Like,
yeah, that's
a
holy
good
grail.
one. And it's not, I don't know, in my opinion, it's not overrated.
Yeah.
It's every bit as good as every penny you pay for it. So.
Yeah, it is a good blend. So anyways, we get together. We've done a couple of these, and couple 3 now, I think. So I think Sammy's
at least
for those. Yeah.
So
I think Sammy's been in there. Listen, it's crazy. 2 years ago, I couldn't get her to barely drink wine, much less bourbon or whiskey. And now she drinks like a fish. Anyways, let's give it another. I'll give it one more. I'll probably be choking on this during the show. Oh, I plan it. You know what? You're right. The longer I do it, the longer I drink it, the better. Like that taste right there was pretty sweet. That's a very, very sweet and very almost like sweet corn.
Yeah. Kind of had the Michters that I brought over the other day is kind of, it reminds me a lot of that. So.
I ran out of tissue.
Time to use your sleeve.
Oh, there we go. It's good enough. Yeah, the Michters was good. That was pretty delicious.
Yeah, so that was it's the standard Michter's small batch, which they make in 2 different kinds. There's it just says Michter's small batch on it, American whiskey or something like that, bottled upstairs. And then there's another one just kind of in the label, like on the bottom of the wording, it says unfiltered. And it's a slightly different, I don't know, it's a really similar proof. They're around the same price point. I tried it today. I actually like I'd heard that one was supposed to be better. The biggest difference visually is like the one is a blue label and the other one is like a brown label. But the one that I brought over, I like a lot more, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, some pretty good stuff. The 101, the Wild Turkey 101, definitely easier to get into.
Yeah.
As far as getting started and from a flavor profile perspective, a little tamer. This one has definitely got some bite to it. But
yeah. Well, and one of the things that you might be able, if somebody's on the fence about bourbon, if you have something that's a little bit lighter in the color or the tasting notes, the lemon twist is top notch.
Yeah, this would be good with lemon. Even orange would be great. Little orange twist in there.
Yeah, we should try it sometime.
It'd kind of take the shoot.
It would smooth it out.
I need to build a bar down here. That's it. And have a bartender during the show. So
this is just going to turn into a whiskey podcast,
guys. If you're joining us live, jump in the chat room. I see Joe and Marv and Ken. Good to see you guys. We'll get started here in just a second. Yeah. Well, let's kick this thing off. Thanks for like the first time I've ever had bourbon delivered for the podcast. That's a new thing. I've had people send me beer. I had I guess I had some rum sent to me one time, some Bundaberg. I think it's Bundaberg rum, which was terrible. And that stuff would take the paint off your car.
Use that to clean wounds.
I even tried mixing it with some Coke, I think, or something, and it was like,
It still wasn't great. You just keep that around for medicinal purposes.
Exactly. Yeah, you get if you whatever.
Yeah.
Kill the weeds.
Instead of get some leaves, it's go get the rum.
All right, let's do this thing. I got a little intro, and then I got some thanks and stuff to do, and then I'll introduce you. So.
Sweet.
This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks show number 532, recorded on April 28th, 2022. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in what could be potentially some dangerous weather tonight. We'll see how it goes. I'll be watching the radar, but of course, we'll post a show with some world-class show notes. They'll be thin. Out at the AverageGuy.tv. Big thanks to our good friend Rich Hay, who was on last week. And of course, Rich caught us up all the things that are going on at Microsoft with his job. Took a new job 6 months ago. If you haven't caught up on the show, go back and get that done. And big thanks to Rich. Good to catch up with him. And of course, big thanks to our Patreon subscribers who support the show each and every month. I appreciate you guys. That number has not changed in forever. If you want to support the show, if you want to support what we do here from a monetary perspective, head out to the averageguy.tv/Patreon. We have just one $5 plan. Super easy to jump in. Do it for as little or as long as you want. And always appreciate that. Helps us do things like I picked up a smart a Wi-Fi garage door opener from the recommendation. I think the brand name on this thing is a Meross, Meross. This came from Randy or Bust Out, one of the two in Discord, and they said, hey, you got to try it out. It was on sale. I checked it out on Amazon. It's coming in. I'll be installing it on the garage door this weekend. Just came in today, so it'll go pair nicely with the Ring Cam that's in the garage. So if the garage door is open and I've left, I can hit a button and close the garage door. Anyways, big thanks to those who do support us on Patreon. Phil Collison, my son. Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. My oldest is with us tonight and is going to come on. We got a bunch of things to talk about, but Phil, welcome. Good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
First of all, why would we have you on this podcast? I mean, why are we doing this? You know, we've had Sammy on, and that makes sense. She's a journalist and an influencer, or at least she wants to be in that space. What prompted you to come on tonight?
You want the real answer, the ideal answer?
Let's do both. I like both.
Okay,
do the real first,
both,
and then
good.
We'll see what ideal was.
So, I've been, with my own exposure to your podcasting so much, and I enjoy talking about certain aspects of certain hobbies and things that I have, and so I had the idea of possibly starting my own podcast. So tossed the idea out, and we started talking about some different things we could do, and my dad said, hey, why don't we could have you as a guest on my show, and it'd be a good way to kind of warm you up, get you some exposure, and get a feel for the structure and stuff like that. And then, I have some hobbies and stuff. Like I said, playing drums, probably the biggest one for sure. It's kind of held steady for quite a long time now. And there's some tech that can kind of play into that, and just music in general that I have got some experience with that we could definitely chat about. And however interesting you guys find that, guess we'll find out.
I think over a cigar and a fire, you were like, hey, I was thinking I could maybe do a podcast. And we were talking about different ways to do it. And I said, you should just come on Home Gadget Geeks. We'll just get you on there, see if you even like it, and give it a try. So, but we will talk some drumming, and not necessarily drum gear, but some tools to help musicians. I think that are pretty cool. Phil, when did you get started with drums? How did that? I mean, I know the story, but for listen, it is a little awkward when you interview your own kids. You have to ask questions like that. But
sure,
what got you interested in drums, and how long?
Gosh, so I think I started around 12, 13. So honestly, we're coming up on 20 years now, which is kind of mind blowing to me. I remember when 10 years seemed like I'd been playing a long time. So it was more of a, there was a guy that played at our church, and he was in high school, and I was, a pre-adolescent and thought he was cool. And the drums just, vibed with me. I liked the way they sound. It's seemed like it was a lot of fun. I liked the way that they add energy to the music and how much the drummer controls that, and just drew me in. So that is kind of how it started. And then thankfully, after some time and convincing, my parents let me save up and buy my own drum set. And
oh my God,
through the course of,
so
my dad using sound protective headphones and, after 2 or 3 hours, my mom would send one of my siblings down with a sticky note saying, last song, I'd pop in a CD and throw some headphones on. I just played my favorite music, and that's
you play for hours.
Yeah,
hours. You practiced and practiced and practiced.
That's one of the ways you can get good at something, is if you love it so much. So
yeah, we fortunately were a part of a church at the time, and there were opportunities every week for you to play. I told you, if you played for a church, you'd always have a place to play, and I still think it's true. Yeah,
that is true.
Think that's true.
It's a little harder these days, depending on where you go, but
yeah, it's getting more competitive.
It still rings true.
Yeah. What was it like growing up with a dad who was always had computers around and was doing nerdy stuff? And I don't know if I've ever asked you that question in that way. We asked Sammy when she was on, but what are your memories of tech always being around the house?
Well, obviously the big one would be gaming. So I have very fond, maybe some not as fond, but overall pretty fond memories of when we would, do the multiplayer. We'd have 5 or 6 different PCs running. We'd play, Command and Conquer and Half-Life, and you'd wipe the floor with us. And somebody'd always cry
for a while. And then you guys started killing me, and I quit.
Right. We finally like just the rage, I guess, just pushed us to get better. Eventually,
there were 3 of you old enough in this shot group, as I like to call it, that where you were all old enough at the right time we could all play these games together, and someone always ended up crying. And it was interesting. We had a good time though, but it allowed me to push the boundaries on the home network, and eventually start thinking about home storage, which got me hooked into Home Server Show, which got me podcasting, which now 11, 12 years later, we kind of end up here. So it's been good to watch you get through that, through high school, through college, all the things that you've done. It's been fun as a dad to just kind of watch you grow in that area. And listen, I recommend it. I know a lot of parents want their kids to do those kinds of things, and you're the only one who really got musical with us. The other boys and Sammy did show choir and sang, so she was did it that way. Yeah. She joined a local choir. So anyways, it's always kind of fun to, when you have your own kids on your podcast and you start talking about that. Super cool. We got a couple tools to kind of talk about tonight, as we think about just stuff that goes along. And by the way, you guys out there listening live, if you got your questions for Phil, throw them in chat, and we'll go from. I don't think anything's off limits. Maybe a few things are off limits. Let me share the screen and bring this up here if I can.
I'll default to you on those.
Wow, this is interesting. So all of a sudden now, the browser, I must have updated the window, and it's not allowing me to share. That's always kind of fun. Let's see if we can get this thing up here. Give it a second. Go to system preferences. Oh. Well, that's weird. We just tested this. Like, you had some problems getting in here.
Yeah.
Wonder if something Wonder if something changed on the StreamYard side that messed some things up because you had trouble connecting. I didn't. Now, if I to get the sharing tool to start working, I've got to stop the broadcast to get this in. Yeah, let me see. Hold on. Before I do it, let's copy this into the same window. Let's give that a try. Phil, let me ask you this question while I'm bringing this up. What do you think has been from a drumming perspective? If you think of all the things you've ever done with it, what stands out as an experience for you that was the pinnacle so far in what you're doing from that? You know, because you did it as a young teen and into your young adult. You're 30. You're coming up on 33, right? 33. You're coming up on 33?
Yeah, September. Yep. That's impressive because sometimes I forget to.
Yeah, no, at that age, I had no idea.
It's starting to fade.
I had no idea. But got a pivotal moment or a?
Yeah, I got a couple. I don't know. So I'm a big context guy. Like this plays into it. It frustrates some people because I have so many layers to, answer questions with. So I would say there's a few different things where just being able to at first it was like the first big thing was like the first time I got into like a legitimate or semi-legitimate like local band. Being able to play live, playing in venues, mic'd up with people out there watching us, original music we had written. That was pretty big. And then kind of on the same field, and a second band that I was in college, we got a chance to open up we had won this Facebook contest. And so we had won this chance to open up for a band called Need to Breathe, who I don't know how big they are now, but they got pretty popular there around that time. They had actually taken a break from touring with Taylor Swift. They were opening for Taylor Swift at the time. And they took like a month or two like break, but then they were still playing shows. And so they decided in that window they were going to, allow some local bands to play with them in some smaller towns. We got to play at the Bourbon Theater in Lincoln, Nebraska, and opening for them actually after the fact was more shocking than while we were while we were on stage. I mean, it was crazy because the place was packed. Yeah. That was the largest crowd I'd probably played original music in front of. And it was pretty exciting. And then I didn't really know much about the band like beforehand. And then we got to watch them live and they were phenomenal. And so I was floored by that too. I was the whole time just standing there. I loved the music they were playing. It had great energy. It was kind of blues rock. And I really, really liked it. And was like shocked that like, wow, I get to open up for these guys. Mm-hmm. And then after that, they were all over the place. They were playing them on local pop stations. And we actually won a second contest. And this one's slightly embarrassing. We opened up for Hanson. Obviously way past their prime. Like their prime was when they were kids and they were all adults. But it was a packed show. We get to play in a good venue, and that was another one.
Yeah.
These days, honestly, anybody that gives me any type of genuine recognition for just the appreciation of what I do and how I add to the music and stuff like that, that for me these days is, hits home just as hard as some of the, popularity type stuff. So
I regularly introduce myself at church as Phil's dad. So maybe the first place I've gone to, and I've been there a long time, but you're more popular than me for sure. They know you. They know the drummer.
I think my wife is overtaking me now.
Well, I mean, she does work there, so that makes a difference. But screen share is not going to work, and that's okay. I can overcome just about anything. So
yeah,
in the drumming at church, in contemporary music in a lot of churches has gotten pretty complicated. Like there's a lot of, I mean, you're talking about, you're talking about maybe 7 or 8 people on the platform, multiple vocalists. You've got You've all got monitoring systems. You're trying to make sure church venues are usually pretty small, so they're always too loud, which is what people complain about all the time. That new music is too loud, right? It doesn't have to be, right? Doesn't have
Oh,
to
there's
be,
a lot of layers.
there's a lot
Layers.
of lot of
There's a lot.
complexity to that.
Yeah.
There's a couple apps that out there. Moses.ai is one of those that allows you to play music in, strip something out, and then use it as you could play the drums and play the track over the top or make a recording. Talk a little bit about how you've used that in the past.
Yeah. So the Moises app is something that probably outside of a church context would be probably the place you would see it the most often, actually, for this particular item. The area that has context for me, which it has more abilities than just this particular context, but this is how I relate to it. You upload a song to the app, and then it kind of strips it down to, depending on what kind of options you've paid for and whatnot. There are a couple of free options. They'll give you a number of things you can, or aspects of the music you can turn up or turn down. So essentially,
or turn off completely.
Yeah. It gives you literally a volume knob, and you'll have like 3 or 4 of them. And typically it uses some type of AI. It goes in there, it picks out the vocals, it picks out any stringed instruments, it picks out the drums, and then something else. And you have the ability to adjust the volume, and then you can use that song as a track to play on top of. And so, like YouTube drum covers, this is where I discovered this app. You can't turn the drums off in the song that you're playing, so then all you hear is the drums that you have recorded. Where there's a lot of YouTube drum covers where you can kind of hear both, and sometimes there's a little bit of trickery in mixing to try to make those two things blend. It actually kind of makes things a little bit more complicated sometimes too, especially if you're playing differently than the drummer did in the original track. So it's kind of a fun way to you get a little bit more creativity, and then it sounds pretty good because you're not conflicted with another instrument of your kind. So that's kind of the aspect of the Moises app.
If you haven't discovered the world of drum covers on YouTube, you just go to YouTube and type in drum covers and your favorite song. It's probably been covered in some way.
Yeah.
And Phil, this is an area, and I'm sure there's other areas where this is true as well, but particularly in the drum cover space, there are there's young ladies. Let's just say they're probably 15 to 20 in there, just like you would not expect that demographic, right, to be in drums.
Just shredding,
just killing it, right?
Just laying it down,
and that's probably an area that I've seen really open up in the last couple of years, where it was that was maybe even a male dominated space, but the ladies have popped in there, and now there's lots of guys doing lots of interesting thing on drums. And if you haven't gone out to YouTube and watched those drum covers, I think it's because they got multiple camera angles, right? Do you spend time watching how other people drum?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting angle as far as my own drumming is concerned. I do this when I'm studying songs that I'm trying to learn. Is obviously the original track is kind of the bones of what I'm going to study. And then depending on the context and how much freedom I may or may not have to create within the confines of the song, I will go and watch 4 or 5 different covers just to see another player's perspective or take on the parts. And then sometimes I can get some little creative licks and some ways to make it kind of interesting and unique. And it's a whole rabbit hole there where sometimes I've found parts that were like a fill that was like super cool, and then learned how to play it and just incorporate it into my own playing in certain areas and stuff. And so that's kind of another slightly tech thing. There's a lot of drummers have kind of made their way with YouTube drum covers. That's how they started, and now they're they're famous. They're playing for big time acts. They're YouTube online educators. They're teaching drum lessons. There's a handful of them I started watching when they were just doing covers, and now they're like, you search certain types of drum videos and they're at the top, and it's kind of been crazy to see some of those journeys.
I love to see the different, they'll have a camera on both feet, and then maybe even different areas for the way they're doing it, and so you can kind of see, they'll sync them together so you can see the way they're doing things together.
Yep.
And they're very cool. I got sucked into the rabbit hole of them one day and just started going, a lot of 80s cover going on.
Yeah, there's stuff in there for everybody, I would think.
Listen, a lot of the good rock ballads come out of the 80s, right? So a lot of good drumming comes out of there. So pretty cool. So sometimes if you want to add in, though, say for what we're doing at church, and you've only got 3 musicians, but you want to make it feel like there's more than that, and you want to play, would you use an app like this for that, or is there another app that you might use to augment or add in additional musicians?
Yeah, so we have an application that is, I'm actually forgetting what it's called now.
Multitracks, that one?
Multitracks, and then it is the playback app. So Multitracks is kind of like the website, and then within that they have multiple offerings at the website, and so we have this playback app that we use it's like a really, really user-friendly, like not quite recording interface, but it's super cool because you can purchase a song that has 90% of the recorded like individual tracks. So like
individual instruments, right?
Yeah. So it'll have drums, it'll have alternate percussion, it has multiple keys, parts, synthesizers, bass, every guitar track they recorded for the song. And what's cool is that we can pump it through the main mix, and then at the laptop right next to me, I can control, the levels of all of that stuff. So
is that always the drummer's job, or do you just take that on?
I'd say traditionally it is. In a lot of musical contexts, if there's some type of laptop that's running either just click track or some type of, tracks of some kind, then the drummer is probably the most traditional, conductor of that particular aspect. But we have had keyboard players do it in the past. But just usually the way, because it's the main reason most people use it is because it has like the click track, and it has what we call a guide in it. And so what's cool about that, it kind of limits you and puts you in a little bit more of a confined space per se. But it structures everything really well. And so throughout the course of this particular track, obviously it's an exact amount of time, it will give you cues, and it'll say verse, chorus, and then it's counting, it's got a metronome that's in there counting for you the whole time. So it really helps solidify the band. It helps, you don't have to completely memorize the song sometimes.
They're hearing the band is hearing those vocals.
Yeah. So, we have these days, to get away with something like that, you got to use an in-ear monitor mix. Yeah. So everybody's wearing like pretty heavily sound isolated headphones for the most part. And the cool part is that through a different application we use in our soundboard, it's another app that we have on our phones, we can control our own mixes as well. So again, lots of layers, but the playback app is super cool because in the past we used this program called Ableton Live, and it was basically like Pro Tools, and you almost had to be like a rocket scientist to run this program. Mm-hmm. It's not user friendly. There's all kinds of hotkeys and little, places to do little things. I mean, the sky was the limit. Space is the limit. Like you could do anything if you almost had to take a college course to know how to run this thing properly. And so it was really hard. If we ran into problems, I didn't know what to do. I'd always have to ask our music director, like, hey, do you know how to fix this problem? I know how to start and stop it, and that's it. So he had to spend a lot of time building these tracks and finding the right audio files. And so like the cool thing about this playback app is it's all built in. All the sounds are there. You can actually manipulate the different keys that you want to play in. So if you want to play in A, B flat, whatever the key is, you can manipulate that stuff too. And it's a much more intuitive, user-friendly. I figured out how to use most of the features the first weekend that we used it. And it was fantastic, and I loved it.
Really meant to be used on a phone or on a tablet device of some kind, big buttons, right?
And we use it on a laptop. So I just got a laptop on a little stand right next to me, and yeah, it's pretty great.
So the Moises.ai.
Moises, yeah.
Moises. Okay. It's really, you would take a song, and the AI part is it figures out, you can take any song.
Yep.
And
almost any song.
Yeah, almost any song. And it'll figure out the parts. It'll go in and based on the frequency and whatever, right? It'll find the parts for you, and then you can start isolating them. Would allow you to take a song off the radio or whatever and do the cover on it. Where this multi-track has some 19,000, and this is, it looks like I was looking through their catalog, gigantic church collection. A lot of churches use this kind of stuff, but
yeah.
But really, the difference is they have every part or almost every part in there,
pretty much,
and it's able to modulate by keys, which is you wouldn't do that necessarily on the Moises app.
Moises app, yeah.
Right. That would just be, hey, whatever the band did it in.
You know what? There might be a way to modulate the keys in that app. I haven't dove that deep into that aspect of it, but much more control from a live music standpoint with the playback app. It's a little bit more of a niche thing too. It's mostly churches using it. Maybe if you are in a cover band, depending on what kind of audio files they have available. I haven't gotten into that aspect of it either, but the context that we use it is definitely church, and that's the majority of the files you can download on it are for that.
I remember going to concerts in the 80s, and let's just say the 80s, and bands just played. Right. They just played, and then they could go as long or short or change it or whatever they wanted to. Right. I'm not sure they were using click tracks in those days. I think the drummer
probably
was
not
the click track. Right.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And I remember going, this would have been maybe the early 2000s. I went to a conference, and they had 3 sound stages in Alan Jackson, who's a country music guy at the time. And he was playing all of his songs to video. So as he was singing, his music video was playing behind. And I thought, that takes an enormous amount of discipline because you have to do it exactly like the video, right? You can't, no riffing, no, hey, let's go around for another chorus, right? Like, no, you're going to do it. You're going to play it exactly like just as long as the video. And then as I've kind of watched you and and kind of helped out from the fringe of what's going on at church, realizing now just how locked in some cases you guys are from a musical standpoint. If you want to play to a music video, or if you've got you have certain instruments that you want to play with in the track, well, then they just can't go around for another, that it kind of requires some discipline. That when I was leading music, when you were in my band at chapel 100 years ago, and at the base chapel, we go as long or short as we wanted to, right? And it's just a whole different world where the technology really drives literally the tempo, but the duration and some of those kinds of things. Do you ever feel like you get too locked in and you can't be creative as a musician?
I could see how in certain aspects of, especially using something like the playback app, if you're playing to the tracks, maybe, but there is some area in, at least for my instrument, where as long as whatever I'm playing fits within the timing. I mean, I guess I could technically be as creative as I want, but as a band, it is kind of limiting. Now, the situation that we're in is that we don't always use just like the full-blown structure of a track, like a pre-built track. Some weeks we have 3 songs that have pre-built tracks, and then one of the songs we play is literally all we hear is just a metronome. And then maybe just a pad that's playing a consistent note underneath us to kind of fill out the sound a little bit. And so, I mean, most of the time it's so we can provide one, it's like we're not the type of church and or band that really does much of the improvising and riffing and feeling the moment and stuff. We get a pretty like time sensitive structure that we try to stick to, because people don't like to be there a super long time. And so, technically we have the freedom to do whatever we want, but if we're using the tracks, yeah, it's limiting, but we don't have to. A lot of times it's, is there a specific sound that we want to hear? Are we, like you said earlier, are we limited on musicians? One week we don't have as many as maybe we had preferred, or something like that. Or sometimes it's literally just, hey, there's a lot of cool sound effects that make this song sound like the song you're used to hearing, and we want to make sure that that's in there. And so that's the beauty of the tracks, is that it's not, for me, it doesn't feel robotic. It feels like an extension of like making people familiar with what's happening, but then it's still different musicians playing it than whatever recording they're used to hearing. But so I think that's cool. But there's definitely a lot of ways to play around with it. And, I don't feel like it's limiting or too limiting, or it doesn't make me feel robotic or, boxed in per se too much.
Stifled.
Yeah.
In that sense. Yeah. It's just I'm not sure I could do what I used to do in this new era of a click track. And I mean, cause does every song have a click track?
Yeah, we play to a click. We have a click going every time. And so something that I wanted to expand on earlier is that within a musical context, this type of thing actually helps a lot with more, I would say, inexperienced musicians. So musicians that maybe haven't played with a live band as much, and they're just not, if you play so much, like doesn't matter what instrument you play, at some point, if you play enough with, especially if you're playing live or you're playing in a bunch of different contexts, recording studios with other musicians to your favorite recordings, at some point you're going to get a feel for being locked into a good tempo, and then what that's supposed to sound like, the way that feels like, that's just how like music feels right, if it's not straying away from that tempo too much. Now it's a whole other aspect we can go into, but anyways, the aspect of playing to a click and or using like guide tracks and stuff like that is it actually helps those musicians that maybe aren't as locked in. It gives them a structure to actually make them more consistent. And so I think technically it may have made your life easier, if you knew how to use it, and then you just had musicians that were willing to buy into it. So that's one of the big reasons why a lot of churches do that, and or just bands, like both the local bands that I played in, I, at the very least, had headphones in where I could hear a click track, and then the band would reference off of me. So then we would at least have a pretty consistent time that way. So it really helps with consistency and just solidarity. And the more people can hear that, the more solid of a sound you're going to put out.
Do you think, because of all this technology that you use for the music that you're doing, both with the bands you've been in and church and those kinds of things, does that have an influence on the way you listen when you're in your car and you listen to music just as you? Does that change anything? Do you hear things differently?
I would say from a tech standpoint, not so much. Typically, if I'm just listening to music for enjoyment, I really get into just the type of sounds that I'm hearing, the beat, the vibe. I'm not a big lyrics guy. There's been a lot of songs where I've realized, man, I don't really paid attention to the lyrics.
Yeah.
I didn't know what they were saying. I've been listening to this song for 5 years now, and
You're your father's son.
I
'cause
never
I sing the wrong lyrics all the time. Sammy goes, Dad, that's not the lyrics. I don't care. I can say what I want.
Yeah, so I'm a big I listen to the instruments, and I just like the way music feels.
Hmm.
Right, that's what I go for. I go for the way the music is going to make me feel. They could literally be singing gibberish. If it's on key, I might not even notice. So I guess the only influence is, as far as from a tech standpoint, is literally just like sound manipulation. So then you get into how is that sound created? Is it digital? Was it recorded live in a studio and then heavily manipulated through sound engineering? And that's, again, a whole another rabbit hole. Music can get pretty complicated, but so I would say yes and no, but maybe not. It doesn't affect the way I think about music, maybe in the way you were asking.
Yeah, no, I just kind of wondering. I never really asked you that question on. I don't know if I've ever sat with you or driven with you in a car where we were listening, to music in the last 15 years. Probably.
Yeah.
Right? It's been a while. So I didn't know, just kind of getting inside of your head a little bit of does that's like seeing the sausage made, does that change when you're in the business and you've got all these mechanics behind the scenes? And maybe the right question is, does that change the way live music, the way you hear live music? How what's going on stage. Sometimes then you think you can see things going wrong, even though you can't, right? That kind of stuff, right? Does that change live performance for you at all?
For sure. One of the things that, if you get to a high enough level of, quality, I guess would be a decent word to use. If you have a band that's good and, they're really they have a lot of experience and been playing for a long time, even musicians are going to be able to listen to that and then not be distracted by the mistakes that they're making, which are more than likely very small. Now, if you're listening to more experienced musicians, then you kind of have to, at that point, you kind of have a decision to make. You can decide to be agitated and or distracted by the mistakes they're making, or you can then try to maybe pick out the good stuff that they're doing. But yeah, I mean, that is something that goes on in my head. Like if I'm watching something or somebody or a band or something that is I can tell hasn't played live music very often and their tempo is all over the place and the band's not gelling very well, or it doesn't really sound like the song that I'm used to hearing and it wasn't intentional that it sounds that different.
You mean every song that we did back in the chapel?
I don't know. I like to think we did all right, but maybe not.
I don't know. We tried. We had a good time.
Now, I'm thankful for that opportunity though, because kind of as you had referenced before, things have gotten a lot more difficult and the stakes have gotten a lot higher. And just like Christian music as a whole has constantly been trying to keep up with everybody else. Now I'd say just from a music standpoint, take out the message, the lyrics, the Christian music, it gets technically a genre, but take all that away and it is so much better than it was 15 years ago. They're coming out with some really, really good music, really skilled musicianship, stuff that sometimes I have to sit down and hash out and practice when 10 years ago it was easy. I'd
key of G and hit the snare, you're good to go.
I just listened to the song a couple times on the way there and it was I could play some of the songs in my sleep. So I'm partly thankful because it challenges me. And then, once I get it, it still is fresh and new and it's fun to play. And we're making this high quality, kind of music and playing it live. But then it's a lot tougher for people trying to, get in on the entry level. Like I was really, really fortunate that I started when I did, because the music we were playing from a drumming standpoint was pretty basic. And so I'd been playing around 6 months. And, when I finally got to play for like my first live like service or whatever. So it's pretty mind blowing kind of see where it started and where it's at now. And I kind of feel bad for people that are learning to play instruments now, because it's like they don't, aside from maybe creating online content, even then the expectations are pretty high. And so they don't have a lot of places to get plugged in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's YouTube can be a spot. Practice. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you alluded to this earlier. You would play, and we'd have to tell you to stop. Like, okay, we need some quiet. Like, in your drums in the day were right over on the other side of this. We filled it in with shelving and some other stuff now, but you were literally just on the other side of my desk down here. The desk was turned the other way. And I would come down, you're right, I'd put earphones on to try and do some work down here while you were drumming, and I just so like just rattle my teeth out. But I knew you loved it, and I knew you were, this was just going to make you a great drummer. And it was always my hope that it would lead to something that was fulfilling. I didn't care if you were successful. I just wanted it to be fulfilling. Like I wanted you to really enjoy it, and it seems like you got there. We started you on electronic drums. I made the chapel. At the time we bought some new drums there. We played on in the chapel. We played on an electronic set. You had a acoustic set at home that you bought, and I don't know the timing on that and how all that worked. So I know the kind of the difference. But now there's so many electronic options. You're still playing an acoustic set. Why have electronic drums not taken over? Because there's so many more things you can do with them from a sampling standpoint, from a sound stand. You can make them sound like anything. And yet I remember you down here tuning your snare, or one of the bom 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 bom, and then there would be a break, bom 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 bom, right? And you were tuning, click click. We'd hear bom 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 bom. Why not just go 100% digital?
Oh gosh, that's the one of the biggest stabs to the heart of any human drummer is the idea that machines might take over. But I think as human beings, and I hear this topic all the time. Like I've been actually listening to a lot of drumming podcasts lately to try to pick up on something that might apply to kind of where I'm at in my own journey. But it's kind of like most drummers that are secure enough with themselves and the context in which they thrive in will understand where technology plays a part and where it doesn't. And I think where most people kind of draw the line is like there's this human element that we want, and that it's not perfect, but then it also, I think the human element adds a spin that technology can't. A drum machine is so perfect that usually you can listen to music that has completely digital percussion, and you can tell, and it has a certain vibe, and sometimes that works. Sometimes people want that for a particular context, and it works for that type of music. But there's a lot of other types of music where they want that human energy, and it's different. It feels different. And the more music you've listened to, and the more maybe you've experienced, whether you're a musician or you've had a lot of experience with different types of musical applications, that stuff starts to separate, and you can kind of tell the difference between all that. So some people can't tell, but a lot of people can, especially when it comes to live music. I mean, come on. There's just this energy that a live band gives you. But sometimes backing it up with some electric stuff is it drives the point home. So there's this, I think you were about to transition into that sample pad we had talked about. And so Roland, which is a really popular kind of electronic drum company, has made this specific, it's essentially, think about it like a mini electronic drum kit. It's rectangular, squarish, kind of 12 by 12 square that's got 9 different rubber pads on it, and you can assign like electronic percussion samples or sounds. It doesn't even have to be like drum stuff. It could be a guitar sound. It can be whatever you want it to be. If you have a sound file for it, you can actually download it to there's a brain in there that you can download it to, and then you hit that pad, assign the sound to it, and every time you hit it, it's going to make that sound. And so it's really, really popular to put, you'll see a drummer with like a live acoustic kit, and then you'll see the sound pad off to like one of their sides. And sometimes they'll incorporate like a different type of like bass, kind of like kick drum sound that sounds different than their actual bass drum. And it just adds, another layer to an effect they're trying to put off, or a different dynamic level as far as the energy is concerned. Hand claps, tambourine sounds, different types of cymbal swells, maybe like a crazy snare drum sound that's really impossible to replicate live, but is really unique, and something that you're like, we can't make this particular sound people are used to hearing happen live, and so we're going to do it electronically. So it sounds familiar, and that's kind of what I was referencing to those tracks before too. So that sample pad is one of the ways you can do that, and kind of make it fun, make it sound recognizable, create a really specific sound that you want, and be able to get a really consistent, product per se, for that particular purpose. And so it's almost like a mini electronic drum kit it's essentially what it is. Electronic drums are the same thing that little Roland sample pad is. It's just bigger, and the drums are spread out, and it looks more like a actual drum set.
It looks like a drum set. Like you'd play it. You don't need it to look like a drum set, but that's what they did to try and get other, so you could transition between the two.
So it felt familiar, and like you could play it the same way you play an acoustic kit, but it's got the same type of triggers in it. It's got a really, really similar brain in it. And so it's just a compact electronic drum kit is really all it is.
I think in the day we had a Roland kit. I think it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was one of the early ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I thought actually, it was fancy. We spent a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
It was expensive.
And it worked. It worked. Yeah. I mean, it cut down on the volume, and
because the only reason I got it is because I knew volume would be a problem. And I knew if I put the drummers on an electronic kit, on an electric kit, on a digital kit, I could control the drum sound. And you and John hated it. My two drummers.
Yeah,
there was not a lot of love.
We tolerated it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. But the important question is, can you get more cowbell? Like, can you use it?
You can. Yeah. Yeah. And you can make it sound almost however you want.
Whatever cowbell sample that you want to use. You do in sampling, right? And this is really common I always say in today's music, but sampling has been common for a long time.
Yeah.
When you hear that consistency in the music, you're like, oh, they're definitely sampling, for that, because it's just the same every single time.
Well, the trick is creating a product that makes it hard to tell if you're sampling.
Right.
So there's electronic triggers you can put on an acoustic kit. And that's another thing that they'll do a lot too, is these little triggers almost act like an electronic kit does, except it's, instead of the mesh head that the electronic kit has, it's just, it's a little square object that sits on top of the edge of the head of an acoustic drum kit. And then when it picks up that signal, it will, you have to plug it into a brain or a, little computer, basically the same that sample pad has, the same that electronic kit would have. And then people use this in live situations all the time, where they'll layer a particular recorded sound, whether it's from a real acoustic recording environment, or maybe it's a digital sound. They blend into the sound they're getting from the microphone that's also sitting above that drum, and they'll blend the two together to create more consistency. It does help with that between different venues when you're playing inside, outside, big venue, small venue.
Gives the sound guy some action or some
and
right?
Gives him some more stuff to play around on. But then it also helps, can help with getting a more consistent sound. Like, let's say that tom is a little out of tune or something like that, he could pump more of the sample in and less of the microphone in, and it gives him some flexibility. But then it technically gives him more to work with, as far as maybe there's some frequencies and pitches and things in that sample that the drum isn't creating, that can add more depth to whatever that sound the drum is making, and make it sound more full or less full, or higher pitched, lower pitched, stuff like that.
I remember years ago now, maybe 20 years ago, I was out, or maybe more, but I was out in California at a conference, and there's a real popular band at the time called Sonic Flood. And we got a chance to spend some time with their sound guy, which, usually you spend time with the musicians. Well, they're just a bunch of lackeys, but the sound guy was really interesting. And it's the very first time I'd been in a big venue like that, and I could actually hear the vocalists. Usually in church settings, all the volume controls come up. You have a volunteer sound person, right? They don't really know how to EQ. They're hoping to get something close, right?
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, man, like I could really hear, I forget the name of the singer. I used to know his name. I could really hear him. Like, it was like crystal clear. How did you do that? And he goes, I created a dynamic tunnel for him in the frequencies. So in all the instruments, I took the vocal frequencies out, so you could still hear them, but their vocal frequencies were minimized, greatly minimized, so that the frequencies where we hear humans singing all you could hear, not all, but mostly what you could hear was him, the vocals coming through. And it was, for me, it was the very first time I was like, oh, that's how that works. Like, it was more than just turning up or turning down sound. It was trying to figure out, where are the vocalists and how do we, because in this setting, I'm sure that was not a new thing. I am sure that professional musicians from the 60s were doing that in all their concerts, right, going forward. But for me, it was the first time I kind of figured that out. Like, oh, frequencies matter in this case.
Yeah, the sound engineers, the live sound guys, the guys running the soundboard in the studio, like, they are the unsung heroes of the music world. Like, for those of you that don't know, like, they are the ones that make your favorite band sound like your favorite band. Like, otherwise your favorite band is just a loud, obnoxious bunch of sound. And like, if it wasn't for that sound engineer, like, your music would not sound the way that it does. And so a lot of people forget about that, and how much work and science and just creativity and ingenuity and stuff goes into sound mixing. Like, it's actually a world that I've kind of been diving into, that's interesting to me. And because, like, that's when I listen to music, I enjoy the overall picture. I enjoy the way everything meshes together, and the vibe that it creates. But then I also pick apart individual types of tones and sounds and things like that. And the sound engineers are usually, aside from whatever the source of the sound is, so the drum that's tuned a certain way, the guitar that's tuned a certain way, or an amp that's set at certain settings, like, outside of that, the sound engineer has a lot to say in the final product of where that comes out. And so it's the sound guy can definitely make or break an experience, for sure.
They're or sound guy or gal, just to be really clear on that.
Sorry.
No,
Old
no.
habit.
Yeah, we're used to saying that, but it's I always used to tell you guys when you guys were young and we were doing this is that less is more. And because everybody wanted to play every single note on
Oh
every
my
single
gosh.
song, and I would just be
So true.
like, "Hey guys, just actually I need a lot less from you. We just don't need that much."
Yep.
Last question on this. When we look to the
Cool.
future, what are you excited about? Or is there anything that you're thinking about starting a podcast where you're going to interview some people or talk to some people or just have some really nerdy conversations about music? As you look ahead to the future, what are you most excited about? I mean, is there anything out there new coming out or anything that you have your eye on from a technology from a technology perspective, maybe?
I guess from a tech standpoint, I guess it would be, like I said at the beginning, I'm kind of toying around with trying to start my own podcast and then get into mainly like some nitty gritty aspects of drums. I really, really enjoy almost everything there is to like the things that you hear when a drummer plays cymbals, snare drums, the electronics, the way the drums are tuned, the shell material, the heads that you use, the type of sticks that you're, what kind of room you're in, different tuning, stuff like that. Like there's so many layers, and I enjoy every single one of those. And so I'm trying to, you know, set up a podcast where I can talk to people about that, and talk to maybe interview some people that also kind of have the same type of passions, and try to kind of explore not only just the specifics of drums, but a lot of the things around drums that kind of influence them too.
Mm,
And just, open up some dialogue. And
yeah.
I like talking to people that are passionate about stuff. It also helps that if we're passionate about the same things, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you know, there's something contagious about somebody's passion for something, and drums is a passion of mine. And I want to try to see if I can get some people to kind of share that and see where it goes.
We always say this on the Ask the Podcast Coach show that I do on Saturday mornings, that sometimes podcasting gives you the opportunity to meet and interview people you never would have gotten an opportunity to do that with. And for some folks, that's famous people. I'm not a big famous person kind of guy. I like to kind of interview friends and family, obviously. I like to give people who don't necessarily have a voice, but certainly from a podcasting perspective, that's an area that it allows for that. Now that you've done this, like did this help? Well, the reason we had you on here was just to give you a little bit first taste experience of what it's like to do a podcast or be on a podcast. Did this give you a good indication? Do you feel any different now than you did before?
I would say that it not hmm, like it like didn't help, but like I was excited about it before, and so like this definitely like didn't give me any doubts. Like it
Good.
definitely makes
Good.
me feel like something that's possible to do. And
Yeah.
obviously you make that really easy. Like pretty good at the flow of this whole thing so far, and that's the things that I'm gonna have to learn. Like
Yeah.
I can talk and talk and talk and talk with like, gotta ask the right questions, gotta have a nice structure, figure out a way to make things consistent, get stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Takes a little practice. Just takes a little time. I mean, the fact that I was relying on screen sharing and that didn't work,
yeah,
for some folks that just wrecks that. Like I don't know what to do. And it's
yeah,
like, well, okay, we're gonna have to figure it out. And you saw me adapt a little bit, and they're like, okay, we can still talk about these things. Actually, for the audio listener who didn't get to see the video, it's probably a better podcast because
probably,
we had
yeah,
to describe everything right in
hmm
a way of not showing screens. So
yep.
there's
And
all
I've
those aspects to it.
kind of learned that as well, listening to other podcasts where
Yeah.
I know that they're shooting videos also,
Yeah.
and it's like, hey, like cater to your listeners only to like describe what you're saying. So that's an aspect that I've learned, that whether it's just video or just audio, like, if we're talking about a particular thing, like be more descriptive.
Yeah. Well, and actually listen, like there was a couple times tonight you went off in a direction I wasn't anticipating. And then I was like, ooh, let's dig in a little bit more on that. Or what you don't say it that way, but
Yeah.
you can kind of influence that conversation. Well, I'm glad. One, I'm glad it only took me 11 years to get somebody else besides my daughter on here. Sarah's been on here, your mom.
Yeah.
Sammy's been on here, but I've never had any of the boys. And so you broke the mold on this one tonight, and maybe
Yeah, I don't know why it took so long.
Well, you had to be ready. You asked, "Hey,
Yeah.
how do you do it? How do you
Honestly,
do a podcast?"
I think I would have been ready 5 years ago. But
Well, yeah, maybe.
who knows? Who knows?
Maybe. Well, but the time is now. I mean, maybe the best time was 5 years ago. The second best time is now. Right?
Yep.
So good stuff. Anything else, Phil, that we should have, that you were hoping to say that you didn't get to say in this?
No. I mean, honestly, like it'd been kind of cool if anybody had any specific questions for me, but
yeah, not a lot of questions in the chat room. I think they're just listening. They're stunned by the incredible depth.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah, it was interesting enough that they got, something out of it. But no, I feel like I got to cover a lot of things pertaining to me and the world I live in, and especially when it comes to drums and the small amount of tech that I interact with in that context.
Know if it's small. So. To be honest, I don't know if it's small. I mean, I think about the amount of tech that we used when, what Chapel that ended in 2008. So, that was 14 years ago. That ended 14 years ago. So between 15 and 25 years ago, we used a small amount of tech. It was still coming, but the tech that's available now, so much greater. And there's just a lot more tech than you think. You take it for granted. Dude, we didn't have cell phones. You could like read. Today I look on the platform and everybody's just playing off their cell phone. Like they've got their iPhone up there playing.
Yeah.
They got the note,
Some people are like using it for lyrics, and some people are using it to just adjust their, in-ear monitor settings. And
yeah, it's like I watch from the platform. I watch folks like do all these things on their phone. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Joe in the chat room says I'm clueless about instruments in general, but his oldest daughter plays drum in the school band. And Joe, I think it's really important to encourage those ladies to continue to be involved in that particular space. I think we could use more. You see this on YouTube. There are more lady drummers than there used to be, but we could use more. So encourage her to play when she wants to practice, and you don't want her to.
Just let her practice.
Let her practice. Let her practice.
Yeah,
it's the best thing I ever did.
I would plug with this, and this might be unsolicited advice, but like honestly, their own passion is definitely going to drive that. And so, this may not even be something you're even thinking about, might not even be, be related to or, applicable to your situation. But the one thing that I've been trying to keep in mind that was true for me is like my passion was what drove me. And so it's like if they have the passion to practice and all they want to do is play that instrument, it's like just obviously there's limitations, but let them play it as much as you can.
We stopped you after 2 hours.
Yeah. And so, but on the flip side, I would say if they're not showing that much interest, it's a good opportunity for dialogue too. It's like, ask them, like, why are you not interested in it? Is it that they don't have an interesting enough context to play the instrument? Do they need to, play it in a different setting, or do they need lessons, or do they need to play, maybe not for the school band, but they want to, it's a good opportunity to explore maybe why they're not interested in it, and then not force them to play it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's my own opinion. I think it's important to make their own interest and love for the instrument drive that. And then sometimes you can do things to facilitate it. But I've heard a lot of horror stories and you know, people that have a bitter taste in their mouth about like being forced to learn an instrument, and it was just a, you know, kind of drove them away from music in a certain context, when there's definitely some gray area in there where you can manipulate it a little bit, but ultimately it's up to them.
Yeah. I think we had a clarinet player at one point in time, and that lasted like 6 months.
Who was that?
Tim.
What?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. We bought a clarinet for him.
Wow.
We rented it from. It was in the early days of the internet. You could rent from, you know, there was a company that was renting online, and so we rented from them, and then they went out of business, and so we had this clarinet we couldn't give back. They were out of business. So
Wow.
we ended up one of our friends needed a clarinet for for band, and we just gave it to him. We were just like, you can just have it, you know. I thought, I played saxophone when I played saxophone in junior high, and then the Barry sax for most of junior high, and then had this crazy idea I'd learn the banjo in high school, and I made my parents buy me one. They never buy me anything again after this. I made them buy me one, and then I never practiced it. I also thought I might play the bass for a while. I got a hold of a bass guitar from a buddy and started learning it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in any of these things. I started, and then I was like, yeah, this isn't really my jam. The vocal arts, or what I'm doing here, is obviously what I like. I sang for a while, and that's okay, but I'm not that great at it. This kind of stuff, and then what I do for the church of being a service host and just being that, hey, welcome, glad you're here. I get to use all my podcasting skills for that.
Yeah.
You probably, as I open the show, that's the same tone I use when I'm in church, right? Doing those kinds of things. So it gives me a good opportunity. I wish there had been more availability for the vocal arts that was not singing when I was younger. Podcasting wasn't available. You couldn't, not everybody could just start their own podcast. Recording equipment was unheard of. You just didn't even have an avenue to.
Well, back then it was called blogging.
No, back then there was nothing. Like,
how far back are we going?
School, when I was in high school, right? You didn't have, you couldn't, you worship the guys on the radio, but there was no way the average guy could do that. That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
These are like talk shows, right? So I wish those opportunities. I think there's a whole bunch of vocal arts. That's kind of this. I think this comes under the heading of vocal arts. I kind of wish that availability was there. It's there today. I'm going to get I just spoke with some folks here in Omaha. I'm going to get a chance to talk with some high school students here in the next month or two about influencers. That's what they call us now, influencers. And in that, where the whole technology around it, doing LinkedIn lives or TikTok or Instagram or all those things. We used to call those social media, and we still do, I guess, but they're really influencing type exercises. So I think a great opportunity for folks to do it. Well, Phil, thanks for coming on, and we'll of course follow along with you on this. If you start this drum podcast, I'm probably going to host it at theaverageguy.tv, I think, in the beginning, just so you've got a place to put it. So it'll be out there and available. We'll talk about it here if you want to go out, or if you know musicians, or you've got drummers maybe that Phil could talk to. There'll be some opportunities to possibly get that going. So we'll see if we can get that fired up. And now that you kind of know this is easy, the technology is actually even easier to get this, recorded and edited and put out. That's even easier. So the hardest part is sometimes content. So thanks for coming out. Couple reminders. In the next couple weeks, Paul Braren is here next week. Will join us. We'll catch up with Paul. Of course, he's been on the show a bunch, and looking forward to having him on. And then right behind him on the 12th of May, Erin Lawrence is jumping in here, and Erin has been on fire reviewing things. And so she's going to have a ton of stuff to talk about. You're not going to want to miss that one. And then I got some more weeks to get scheduled. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. Of course, theaverageguy.tv, powered by Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. You know that's Christian. In fact, I got a Cyber Frontiers in the hopper. I just need to get it released. Maybe this weekend. If you haven't subscribed to Cyber Frontiers, go out and get subscribed to that as well. And if you looking for some hosting, plans as little as $10 a month. MapleGrovePartners.com will get you there. And I think that gets, send me an email. If you got feedback or you've got something for Phil, you can send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. If you want to leave me a voicemail, homegadgetgeeks.com. And if you really want to join in the conversation, join us on Discord, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. A lot of great, it's not too overwhelming. So if you don't want to join another group that's not talking every day, this is not it. This is little bits at a time. It's a great Discord group, and I like hanging out there. So theaverageguy.tv/Discord. We'll be back next week with Paul Braren. We'll do a little bit of a post show if you're listening live. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody. Do recording still on, just so you know. So what do you think's the next step on getting started with the podcast for you? And did you finish your bourbon? I saw you re-pour the 101.
Oh yeah. I honestly I can't remember if I did one pour or two of the 101.
Polished off of both.
No, it's still there's still some in there. I kept it under control.
That's good. I just had yours, and then I just ended up drinking a regular Coke.
You know what? I think I'm gonna splash a little bit more of this rare breed in there. I want to go back to it. And, okay, next steps. So I would say, gosh, I don't know. I kind of feel like there's a lot of things like you toy around with, like a intro sound clip, maybe a good structure to follow, or some like valid content to start off with, as far as like reaching not more of like a general audience. Obviously, like we're going to be talking about drums, so like it's going to be a specific audience. But the cool thing, it'd be kind of interesting that I also don't maybe know exactly where to start, is like, where do I start that gets kind of a broad reach, but then starts to like give me some input, questions people are asking, stuff that gets me the most like momentum, I guess. The FAQs, frequently asked questions, like stuff like that. So like kind of start to figure out like, okay, people are listening, like really are interested in this kind of stuff. Yeah. And then that'll help me figure out like, hey, what kind of people should I reach out and interview? Like, obviously I know a lot of musicians. I know a lot of different people in the music world that are not just drummers. And so I've got some people with some sound engineering experience, which I feel like conversations with those guys would be pretty fascinating, pretty educational. And then, I've got some connections with some other drummers that could, honestly, I'd be super excited if it led me to connections to like drummers that either I listen to on other podcasts or that I've watched on YouTube, or it's something like that. Like, even if it's like somebody that's not as popular, that would still be really, really cool to just make that connection. Yeah. So my biggest thing, the same reason you do this podcast, is just to connect with people, talk about things we're passionate about, have a good time. It's an opportunity, like you said, to connect with people that you otherwise never would have been able to have a conversation with. So that's the goal. Yeah. Well, and I gave you this advice. Just start with some, create a format. You got to start with something. Try it, see what works, modify it, try it again, change it, try again. Find the sweet spot. And then once you get comfortable, then start going after your bigger names. Start going after, once you kind of settle in and get, because you're going to suck at first, and then it'll just get better. Just the more you try, the better. It's like anything. It's like playing an instrument. Yeah.
You get better at it. You get, I'm still always tweaking things, and there's things I do wrong according to the industry. I just don't care. I
Yeah.
don't want to do it that way. Like
Right.
no, I'm not going to do it that way. So at the end of the day, you can do it any way you want. You just need to figure out what you want to do. The way you want to do it may not, we talked about this in pre-show. The way I do this podcast now is not the way popular podcasts are done. It's never going to be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. I don't care. I don't really want them. The bigger they get, the bigger jerks come in, and you're like, I don't
Yeah.
want to deal with those people.
All the critics start to surface.
Yeah, all the trolls come in, and I just not a Uncle Mars.
Who's Dave Jackson?
Dave Jackson is he's who I podcast with on Ask the Podcast Coach. So on Saturday mornings, when we talk about podcasting. So
Okay.
he's my co-host there.
Yeah.
Or I'm his co-host, depending how you look at it. But all we do is talk about podcasting. But yeah, I'd say, at the end of the day, you got to do it. Even the Gallup podcasts that I do it my way, and there's some folks who are like, hey, why don't you do it this way? And I'm like, because I don't want to. I do 150 of those things a year. So 3 a month. I mean, 3 a week on average.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to do them the way I want to do them. Like, that's too many to try to force a mold or to do it differently. I know how to do them a certain way where I feel like I'm the best at it from using my talents. They want to do something different, they can start their own show. Like, hey, if you want something different, go do your own. But I know what works for me now. I've done this for 10 years and probably done 3 or 4 or 5,000 of these things. So I'm just confident enough to go, yeah, this is what I like to do. And if you want to do something different, you can start your own. Doesn't have to have me. In fact, I've tried on some of them, I tried not to be on them. Like, they're like, hey, we want to start this podcast, but we want you to be on it. I'm like, I don't want to be on it. They're like, no, we really want you to be on it. And I'm like, okay. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to be on it though. Now I know why, and I get it, but I didn't want to be on some of them. So figure out what works for you and then just go with it. It's the easiest. It's the best, I think. Everything I do kind of fits who I am as a personality. You don't always get that opportunity. I mean, I think the planets have just aligned in the last decade or two.
Yeah. One of the things that I've actually kind of just, listening to some of these other podcasts has kind of been helping me. Some of these guys have sections where, in either just other podcasts or just, they have multiple like social media outlets and ways that people can either submit emails, Facebook comments, questions and stuff. And so they'll have these segments in their podcasts where questions that were asked in other venues or, outlets, they will compile a list of, 1, 2, 3. And then, obviously they have some time to prep and come up with a decent answer for that question, but they get to kind of pick and choose and be like, well, that's a really interesting question, and I feel like I have a good answer for it. And then it's, they have a segment of the podcast where they go over stuff like that. And sometimes that ends up being some of the stuff they talk about, and that ends up being like the theme of the episode. So like, I'm actually kind of interested in, like if Joe like has any, he said his daughter plays in the school band. Like, get me interested to see, like, does she watch YouTube drum covers? Does she like to practice to her favorite music? Does she, has she expressed any interest in, like different types of gear, or like, did they buy her a drum set? Like, what, that's interesting to me, like, cause that's my world. And so, I would say you probably have some valid questions. Maybe just haven't popped into your head yet. But that's something that I've kind of like, since, he started talking about it, I'm like kind of interested, like, do you feel like it's going to go somewhere? Like, does she does she live and breathe it? Is that all she talks about? Is it just kind of a side gig? Like, because some kids play for 4 or 5 years and it's, they like it. They show up to practice. You don't have to fight them about it, but they're not like crazy about it. And then they drop the sticks for 10 years and then they start back up when they're 25 and all of a sudden they're this, crazy phenom that ends up being a YouTube sensation, or like start teaching drum lessons, or you never know. Like it's just really fascinating.
Yeah. You just never know. Well, it'll be fun to get you start getting you rolling on this and get your own thing going and just kind of watch you do what you do and help with the production of it. I'm not going to be on it, which is great, and get you going on that and give you an opportunity to, although maybe someday you'll get to the point where you're like, I want to, I want to hear from my dad's perspective, for parents who are struggling with this. Talk a little bit about, why from a parent's perspective, why you put up with it,
It'd be an interesting wrinkle. Like if for some reason we reached that demographic of like have parents with kids that they're struggling with learning an instrument, like they're listening to my podcast, like that. Honestly, I would like that a lot, but I have a hard time believing that I would reach many people in that situation. But who knows?
Think about this, Phil. You're 33, coming up on it. In the next couple of years, your age demographic, you birds of a feather flock together. Your age demographic's going to have all these kids that are going to start making their way into middle school.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you might be reaching young musicians now, but then, a couple years down the road, they're all of a sudden, they're like, I'm parenting and I'm a musician and my life is a wreck. How do I do this thing? Right?
Yeah.
So you never know. You may, some advice to give out on this. Guys, if you're listening live, thanks for coming out and good having you tonight. I appreciate you guys each and every week. See you back next week, Paul Braren. I'm sure he'll have a lot to say. So excited for him to be on here. And you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you next Thursday.